Hello and welcome to Scandinavian Design 101.
I'm Andreas.
I'm Sanna.
And we live in Sweden and we are very interested in modern design and we love Scandinavian design.
Very. We've worked at an auction house for a long time.
Yes.
You're an expert, I'm his sidekick. And our purpose with this channel is to teach you stuff about Scandinavian design you may or may not know already. Some anecdotes possibly. Who knows? Just wait and see.
Yes, and today we will start with the very basics on this topic. And the first question, I guess, to answer is, what is Scandinavia?
That is a good question.
And it's a very good question. And the thing is that Scandinavia is just 3 countries in the northern part of Europe. And it's Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, and nothing else. That's Scandinavia. And geographically, it's not a very small area, actually. It's quite big, but very sparsely populated. Sweden is the biggest country with a population of about 10 million. And then Denmark and Norway has a population of about 5 million each. So this gives a total population in Scandinavia of just over 20 million. And that's the same size as the city of Beijing, for example, but allocated in an area 4 times the size of Great Britain. So you understand that it's not many people living per square kilometer.
Absolutely not. And even though there are differences between the countries, the culture in the Scandinavian countries is similar to each other. Historically, there have been a lot of conflicts between the Scandinavian countries, and the borders have shifted a lot through the years. But the last 200 years have been dominated by peace and collaboration. Also, the languages have big similarities. Yeah. But to be honest, we often speak English to each other because it's a bit difficult, I would say. Yeah, especially the Danes.
Yeah, the common Swede wouldn't really understand the Dane. No. We used to work for a Danish company, so we understand Danish quite well. But
you do, I don't.
Okay, English
with
is
difficulty.
Yeah,
great difficulty.
But then, yeah, that's Scandinavia. But everyone interested in modern design have heard about Scandinavian design and Nordic design. But what's the difference?
Tell me.
Yeah, because if you ask a common Swede on the street, what's the difference between the Nordic countries and the Scandinavian countries? They don't know. But there is a quite big difference. And the thing is that Scandinavia is actually a sub-part of the Nordic countries, which also includes Finland, Iceland, and then some other regions like the huge, actually, Arctic island of Greenland. But when it comes to design, the big difference is, I would say, Finland. Because something from Finland, an item from Finland, isn't Scandinavian design, it's Nordic design. Yeah. But a Swedish table or a Danish chair is both a Swedish design, Scandinavian design and Nordic design. So it doesn't really matter, but it can be good to know the difference.
Really. What about the landscape?
Yeah.
The landscape and the environment help to shape the design in Scandinavia.
Yeah.
More than 2/3 of Sweden is covered in forest, mainly pine trees. Historically, wood have been extremely important for the Swedish economy, and almost everything was built from wood.
Yeah.
Most houses and all furniture and even the housewares in the old farmer households. The people have always taken care of the local and natural resources and made sure they were used in the best way.
Yeah.
This can also be seen in the 20th century design, where steel were rarely used. Instead, bent wood and veneer dominated. And one example is the Swedish architect Bruno Mattsson.
Yeah.
He was highly influenced by the German Bauhaus school, and he used local birch instead of tubular steel. And sometimes bentwood have been called the tubular steel of Sweden. Yeah. Or is that something you just say?
No, it has been it's a quite good expression because it tells how important the bentwood was for Scandinavian design.
Okay.
But it wasn't just the forest who was important to shape the Scandinavian design. It was also the many rivers and creeks of for example, Sweden and Norway. And the waters were important for the early furniture industry in the late 19th and early 20th century because it supported the machinery with power. But it was also important to transport the timber from the forests of the north down to the sawmills and then to the industry. So without all these rivers, it wouldn't have been so much industry in Scandinavia, I think.
Not at all. Sweden was very poor during the 19th century, and the lean and stony soil couldn't provide enough crops to feed the population. So over 1 million Swedes emigrated to North America.
Yeah, it's extremely many people.
1 million. I didn't really know that.
No, because now Sweden has a population of 10 million, but they didn't then. Perhaps they had 4 million, and then it's 1 of every 4 Swedes emigrated to America. That's sick.
A few returned, bringing with them furniture from the New World, and that's how the classic carver chair came to Sweden. It turned out that furniture made by the religious Shaker movement in America suited the Scandinavian taste and needs very well.
Yeah.
These furniture can be traced through the 20th century Scandinavian design, not least in the furniture by Danish architect Börje Mogensen, who traveled to Sweden in his youth to study chair design. It's also a good example of how historical furniture from around the world came to inspire many Scandinavian architects, making Nordic interpretations of old furniture models.
Yeah, that's true. And when it comes to Scandinavia and what people think about when they hear Scandinavia, it's not just the nature, it's also politics. Because Scandinavia is often used as an example in the international political debate. Bernie Sanders, for example, the president candidate in the US, he wants to make the US more like Sweden and Norway. But what does really...
what does it mean?
What does it mean? And I want to do a brief history here, because Sweden held its first democratic election in 1921, and then every citizen were given the equal right to vote. And since then, the Social Democratic Party has been the dominating political player, influencing, the whole society, actually. And the result was a strong state with high taxes, but also a generous social welfare. We had free healthcare, free universities, and so on. And some foreigners might be shocked when they hear that the income tax in Sweden is more than 30%. I think it's here in Småland it's 33% or something. But the universities, well, they are free, and that made everyone. It made it possible for everyone to educate themselves, and that's a good thing, of course.
You even get paid a little to go to university.
Yeah, you get like
a small amount.
Yeah, like $300 or something.
Yeah,
every month.
That much?
Yeah, it is.
Cool.
And why are we talking about politics? The thing is that the Social Democratic government of Sweden had a huge impact on the architects during the mid and first half of the 20th century. Because the architects, they were commissioned to furnish the modern Swedish society. And therefore, the furniture was often characterized by simplicity and function. And the objects were supposed to make the everyday life more comfortable. They shouldn't mark class or wealth or anything like that. And these ideas wasn't anything new, of course. They can be traced back to, for example, the Bauhaus movement in Germany. And the objects produced during this time, they should be cheap to buy and suitable for mass production.
But Scandinavian design is not all about minimalism.
No.
An era in the Swedish design history that we really like is the 1920s, just before this functionalist time.
Yeah.
And it's called the Swedish Grace.
Yes.
You hear by the name that it's fantastic.
Yeah, we love it.
was a period highly influenced by neoclassicism, a Swedish version of the Art Deco movement. Ornamentation and a high level of craftsmanship characterized the object design during this time. Some important architects during this time was Carl Malmsten, Carl Bergsten, and Märta Mås Fjätterström.
Yeah, Märta Mås Fjätterström. Her carpets, I think you have seen on auctions around the world. They are magnificent.
The Swedish contributions to the 1925 Paris World's Fair was a great example of Swedish grace, and it's all amazing.
Yeah.
Something happened in the late 20s, though.
Yeah.
The functionalist ideas started to influence many of the Swedish architects. In 1930, a big exhibition was held in Stockholm.
Yes.
The Stockholm exhibition, and its slogan was "Acceptera," which is Swedish for accept. Quite similar.
Yeah.
The architects behind the exhibition wanted the Swedish people to accept modernism and mass production. And this started a big conflict among architects. Carl Malmsten didn't like these ideas. He had a more historical approach to design.
Yep.
Architects like Bruno Mattsson, on the other hand, focused almost entirely on function. And the same conflict can be seen in Denmark,
Yes.
where Kåre Klint stood for the more historical approach.
Yes, so it's...
And he was like the father of Danish modern design.
Yes,
so
that's true.
So it's quite...
But we will talk about Kåre Klint later on, I think, because he's so extremely important for whole Scandinavia.
We will talk about many things. This is just the introduction, so you know what is Scandinavia, so we can move on to the
But now
stuff.
we were talking a bit about Denmark now. And we should mention that in Denmark, the focus was set a bit more on craftsmanship than in Sweden. And that was perhaps because the many skilled cabinet makers played a big part in this Danish design wonder. And between 1927 and 1966, the Copenhagen Cabinet Makers Guild held yearly exhibitions displaying the latest in design. And collaborations between architects and cabinet makers was, the main reason why Danish design was so successful. And I want to mention just a few of these collaborations. For example, we have Hans J. Wegner, who collaborated with cabinet maker Johannes Hansen. We have Börje Mogensen, we mentioned him before. He collaborated with Erhard Rasmussen. And then our favorite, I think, Finn Hjul, this great architect. But he collaborated with Nils Vodder, and this collaboration was extremely successful. And all these collaborations led to furniture that came to, influence designers not just in Scandinavia, but all around the world.
Of course. Despite the importance of wood that we talked about, other materials were indeed also used, of course.
Yeah.
One good example is the Danish architect Paul Kjærholm, who produced furniture in steel, highly influenced by predecessors like Mies van der Rohe and Lily Reich. Also, Arne Jacobsen worked with the modern materials like steel and rubber foam, creating the classic egg chair, for example. During the 60s and 70s, space age design reached Scandinavia. And that is also amazing.
Yeah, we really love also the space age era.
Especially Werner Panton. My personal favorite. Yep. But also Eero Aarnio och Henrik Thor Larsen created furniture inspired by French and Italian design.
Yep.
Two of the most spectacular designs was the ball chair by Aarnio in 1963 and the Ovalia designed by Henrik Thor Larsen in 1968.
Yes. And perhaps if you've seen the movie Man in Black, they used the Ovalia chair on the movie posters.
Wasn't it
fake? They were fake Ovalia chairs, so he sued the movie company. And we will talk about that some other time.
We will.
But this was, a brief introduction to Scandinavian design.
And Scandinavia.
And
politics and the landscape.
Yeah, and a lot of things. But we just want to talk a little bit about why Scandinavian design is so popular around the world. And it's interesting, I think. But, first of all, there were a lot of talented architects in Scandinavia creating, fantastic furniture and other items. So, that's the main reason, I think, why Scandinavian design is very popular around the world.
But why is it better than other places?
Yeah, but then we can look at the idiom, the clean and simple lines of the Scandinavian design, I think. It's very appealing for a lot of people. The objects are rarely extreme, not like the Italian design or anything like that. It's more elaborated and adapted for their use and therefore attractive for many buyers. And when you think of Scandinavian design, you don't just think about clean lines because you don't really see the clean lines, I think. I want to show you two examples to make a point here. And this is a chair by Börje Mogensen. It's a classic one. It's the hunting chair made in 1950. And this doesn't really look like a clean, simple chair. It looks quite advanced, but it's not actually. It's very simple, and it's, if you look at it from this angle, you see that it's just straight lines. And also from the front, it's exactly in the same way. It's not this much three-dimensional bent wood parts and so on. So it's clean, simple, and it's perfect in a hunting cabin, but it's also extremely perfect in just a normal apartment today. And the same goes for the Börje Mogensen Spanish chair here. It's also a chair that might look a bit complicated and advanced, but it's just a functionalist, practical furniture. And special for this chair is the wide armrests. And they look like some design feature, but they are actually not. They are made as just because if you, for example, have a beer or a glass of water, you don't have a glass of water, but if you want, you can just use it as a tabletop. Yeah. And if you have a lot of guests over and you don't have enough seating places, three persons can actually sit on a hunting chair.
Really?
One on each armrest and then one in the middle. So practical, functional furniture, attractive for many people. So I think these are two good examples, and also good examples of how old furniture types inspired these modern Scandinavian designers to create Scandinavian versions of the old, for example, the old 18th century Spanish chair here.
Great. Scandinavian design has not always been this popular as it is now. It's interesting to note that the functional lines weren't very popular among the people in the beginning when it was created.
No.
One good example is the furniture made by Börje Mogensen in the 40s. His intent was to make furniture for the working class homes with an exclusive focus on function.
Yeah.
But this furniture weren't very cheap, and the customers had a hard time to understand why they should buy a simple chair if they could get a decorated one, an expensive looking one, for the same kind of money.
Yeah. So this means that the classic modern Scandinavian design is very suitable for the modern society and the modern way of living. I mean, it's easy to furnish with this kind of objects if you live in like a small apartment or if you move a lot. And that's how we live today. We don't live in the same place for 50 years any longer. We move a lot. We change jobs and so on. And also, I would say that quality and sustainability is something that's very appealing for people today when cheap mass production and low quality items dominate the whole market. So good design, I mean, that's something we're really starting to enjoy today. And of course, good design can be kept for many, many years. You can love your designer sofa for 50 years, but if you buy something cheap from IKEA or some other low price company, you will have it for 2 years and then you will throw it away, actually, probably. I think. And the Swedish architect Yngve Ekström is famous for his Lamino chair. He once said that good design should be able to resist the wear and tear of the eye. And that's a quite good expression. I really love it because it says a lot about how good design should be. And then, I mean, often if you search on the internet or so on about Scandinavian design, it's much about Swedish mythology and Swedish folklore. The thing that if you buy a piece of Scandinavian design, you also buy a piece of the Scandinavian lifestyle and this. But I don't want to focus on this. It's interesting, of course, but we want to focus on the objects and the architects themselves. And that's what we are going to do in the following episodes here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was our introduction.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed it. We're gonna talk about more interesting stuff if you don't particularly want to hear about Scandinavia.
Now we're going to talk about the fantastic architects and so on.
Of course.
Yeah.
Hope you liked it. And if you did, please click the thumbs up and subscribe if you want to. We'd be very happy.
Yeah. And if you like Scandinavian design, please follow us on Instagram too. We're daily posts about Scandinavian design.
Daily.
Yep.
It's the same as what we are called here, of course. Scandinavian Design 101.
Yes. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.